wine to me has never been about an alcohol delivery system, which is what which is what alcoholic beverages are for so many people. A lot of people are missing the meaning for wine. But you said, what keeps it together? What keeps it in front of people today? That it is a meaningful and memorable way of consuming an alcoholic beverage that goes beyond a beer, goes beyond whiskey. I'm sorry, it just does. Certainly goes beyond, sparkling hard seltzers and whatnot. There's no lifestyle associated with hard seltzer, but there is a lifestyle associated with wine, and usually that lifestyle is centered on art or intellectual pursuits of some kind. They always seem to translate. It's like being a musician. If if you study music, you have a different kind of appreciation than someone who just consumes music or listens to it. And it's like that for me. So yeah, I mean, if it's not just a beverage, it's my whole, I gotta be honest, it's like my whole existence right now is just the pursuit of this wonderful thing that's wine. And I think people find that.
All right, welcome everybody back to the Barrels and Roots podcast. My name is Sean Trace, I'm your host, and I have an awesome guest with me today. Now, would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. My name is Jim Silver. I've been a wine industry executive, if you will, for 3 decades, covering places as extraordinary as New York and California for most of the time, but also leading wineries, leading import companies, even opening a cider company at one point. But a long career in the wine business.
That's awesome. Now, what got you started in the wine business? What was it that made you say, hey, this is what I want to be doing?
I think it was completely by accident. I was in school. I was part of my college training was a field trip, if you will, to La Varenne in Dijon, in France. And so here I am studying culinary and in Dijon, and we went on our own little field trip, as one does when you're 19. You find a place to drink. We ended up going to Clos Vougeot in the heart of Burgundy, and as a 19, 20-year-old kid, seeing and experiencing amazing, and I mean amazing, Burgundy wines for the first time. It was like lightning came through the stained glass window and hit me. Absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah.
And so I got back home, completed the courses, graduated, and started working in food and beverage. But the wine, it just never left me. I had to have it. So I really began concentrating a great deal on wine, and I never looked back. It's now, 35 years later, or something like that.
I mean, it's awesome. Like, you've spent your entire adult life in wine. Beyond the business, what is it about wine that continues to pull people in generation after generation? And what pulled you in?
That's a big question. There's a lot to it. Wine is, I'll tell you, for me, it's emotional. Okay, when I go and taste a wine, especially for the first time, it doesn't. And I'm not talking about expensive wine necessarily. I'm talking about any wine that's meaningful. The response from me is going to be emotional, and it's not something I don't burst out in tears or I don't start laughing or anything like that. I mean, but the reaction I have to the wine is really very internal. And that's how you determine, for me, that's how I determine the difference between what's important, what's meaningful, what's not, what's a throwaway wine. Because wine to me has never been about an alcohol delivery system, which is what which is what alcoholic beverages are for so many people. A lot of people are missing the meaning for wine. But you said, what keeps it together? What keeps it in front of people today? That it is a meaningful and memorable way of consuming an alcoholic beverage that goes beyond a beer, goes beyond whiskey. I'm sorry, it just does. Certainly goes beyond, sparkling hard seltzers and whatnot. There's no lifestyle associated with hard seltzer, but there is a lifestyle associated with wine, and usually that lifestyle is centered on art or intellectual pursuits of some kind. They always seem to translate. It's like being a musician. If you study music, you have a different kind of appreciation than someone who just consumes music or listens to it. It's like that for me. So yeah, I mean, if it's not just a beverage, it's my whole. I got to be honest, it's like my whole existence right now is just the pursuit of this wonderful thing that's wine, and I think people find that.
Yeah, it is interesting that you bring that out because I had a good friend who's an amazing guitarist, is an amazing guitarist, and when I listen to music, I'm a subpar guitarist. I love love music, but I've never. My friend is able to speak
Yeah,
guitar. Like when he plays, he doesn't play guitar. He communicates with guitar. He gets into it, and it's this deeper level of understanding. And you know, it's interesting because I love how you talked about that as well. You know, when except for some of the microbrews I've seen, when my friends consume beer, it's just, you know, we're having fun, hanging out. But when people go in and a bottle of wine is opened, there's something else that happens. It is this level of community that comes together. I mean, you know, and I've had many people say this on the podcast, like when you go to drink a beer, you're not sharing it with four people, you know, but you know, a bottle of wine is most likely getting shared between the group. You know, you're pouring several glasses, and it itself becomes a talking point. You know, the wine itself can be something that people can discuss, and that in and of itself, like, I love my dad, and my dad and I have for many years I found it difficult to talk about things. We have different views in the world. And when we get together, I love my dad to pieces, but one of the biggest challenges is having a common speaking point. And because his worldview is so different from mine, our life experience is so different. But there's one thing that we can always talk about, and that's basketball and our shared team. One of the beautiful things that I find with wine is it immediately gives the group something to speak on.
sure.
That is not politics. That is not the things that we are often speaking on these days. You know, it gives this starting point for dialogue and discussion, which I love.
Yeah, no, I'm. You know, you're touching on it precisely, and this is what's been said about wine for what 6,000 years.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
just what you said about four people consuming a bottle together. It is a communication. It is a commune, if you will, at least for that moment. You mean you don't just drink wine; you inherit it and you share it and you move through it, and it becomes. You asked originally what is it that makes it persist, that keeps it persistent in people's minds, is that wine is memory, and it is a means of time travel. When you really look at great moments, wine shows up in most of them. Most of them.
Yeah.
And I forget who said it, but it was a very comical remark that no great conversation started over a salad. Um, I wish I knew who said that. That was a very good one, though. It's true. I mean, it begins with in vino veritas and ends with where wine insists upon itself. It insists on being very specific. It insists on being a part of you. And it's that's why my response to wine isn't very technical. I mean, it is because I'm in the business and I've always been in the business, and you had to be technical, but the response developed into an emotional response. It developed into like, wow, this is just wonderful. This is a place. This is a time. This is a history. These are people that made this. It wasn't made by a machine.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. A bottle of Budweiser is kind of cool on a hot day, but it was made by a machine. Today, I mean, it wasn't always like that. But wine doesn't necessarily have to be like that. Wine really is people, place.
I saw just before we got on here this photo of a room in I don't know, somewhere in the world, and it doesn't matter where, but it was a textile room, and it was a massive, massive, massive room. And it said, and it was bragging, it's like this giant room producing, clothing, and not a person in sight. And I was just like, I don't know if that's something we should brag about, because at the end of the day, there is humanity in the things that we've created throughout time. I'm a photographer, and I love, and I will say this, and I get on the podcast and I'm just constantly going on about this. I love old film photography, and there's a certain reason. There is a core reason that I love it so much. It's because it's finite. Because when I get a rollout, I have 36 images, or 24, depending on what I'm getting, but 36 to really capture that moment. If you're at an event, now with digital photography, I love it as well. It makes it much easier for work. If I'm, going to do a job, I'm like, okay, let's, of course we're shooting on digital. Why? Because you can get 2,000 images, and your odds of getting something nice is much higher. But when I only have 36, the skill that comes out to get a great image is much higher. You have to be ready. You have to be present. You have to be in that moment, like fully existing in that moment and aware of it, and I think that is something that we are losing. And when you are opening a bottle of wine, you are not just opening some mass-produced thing. I mean, certainly there are those, but you are opening something that was created by not one, but hundreds, if not thousands of people, every farm worker who was out there tending the grapes, every person who drove a truck or a tractor moving the grapes from one place to another. The cellar workers, you have the winemaker, you have the endless number of things that were going into it. Let's not forget the sun and the rain and the time that went into that as well. It's such a powerful thing. And when we pour a glass, it's almost like a meditation of time, of the time that passes for it and for ourselves. What did we go through? I've got a bottle over here. It's 2022. Where was I in 2022? What was I doing? And you know what I mean? Where was I at that time and place? If I look back at photos from that time, my daughter was small. And how much has changed between us in that moment? And then you open that beverage up and wow, you just get hit by that time.
And now you know exactly what I mean by time travel. It's a fun game to play. Like this Christmas, I opened a 1970 vintage port. Oh my gosh, it was fabulous, by the way. It was a Worry Sport. Absolutely astonishing. I didn't think it was going to be any good, but it was perfect. And I did the same thing, like I always do. Like, where was I in 1970? Well, I was very, very, very small. I can tell you that. I was very small in 1970. But how much time has passed since that wine was made? And go back to 1970 and realize that it was made with no technology in Portugal, where there was even less. But and how it was constructed and how it was made by vines that were probably planted either just before or just after the war, right? There's a lot to contemplate in that bottle. That's this where we're talking a lot about history, and you're talking a bit about music. It's true. I wrote a Substack piece while I was waiting to come on today. I was thinking about what we were going to talk about, and I wrote a Substack piece that kind of laments, which I do a lot these days. I've been lamenting what we're losing in the wine business, and that is we're losing that integrity that you're reaching out for right now. You're looking for the history and the thoughtfulness and the people behind it and the hands that made it and the artisanal crafts, the craftsmanship that goes into producing a bottle of wine, not to mention agriculture and chemistry and all those things. But when you think about music, no one ever asks you like, "Hey, Sean, make it simpler, please. I can't understand all these notes." No one says, "Listen, I prefer all my music be made by in nursery rhyme style." No one thinks like that. Nobody wants a nursery rhyme every single day. Sometimes they want to hear real complexity, a real, Miles Davis, and sometimes they want something robust, like the Foo Fighters, right? They want
Yeah.
options. And options are important, and that's one of the things that we're losing. And this is what I lament in my latest Substack, is that we're given false options right now. Go into a Safeway, go into a
Mm.
Safeway in California, and you will see, I don't know, 3,500 different wines. Not a single one I'm interested in. Not one, because they're all the same. They just are. And I know that'll certainly, some people will argue with that, but they are the same. There's nothing to buy there. So the discovery and the exploration of wine has become too expensive for the modern society. For the wine business is now based on business. The wine business was never built for business. It was built for itself. It does not, and it never did, rely on business. And that's why there's no accounting software for the wine business. That's why there's no, that's why no one can conform to the wine business. So when we try to jam the wine business into modern business, they don't mix. And what comes out the other end is sameness. Wine's built wine's built literally to be boring. Wine's built literally to just satisfy what you need for that moment at $16.99 maybe, or $14.99, and they taste the same as the one right next to it. And the only difference is the label. And that's the beauty, is being exchanged for efficiency, for speed, for business. And I wonder how many people are tuned into that. Very few. I mean, a nerd like me, sure, I'm tuned into that kind of thing. But who will remember what was lost 50 years from now if we continue doing it like this? Sure, there are exceptions, but
There was I love watching videos about Jay Leno and his cars. Jay Leno collects these old cars, and these cars are special because one of the things that Jay loves is to find the outliers, to find the cars that are not the ones that you know about. He goes back and he finds steam engine cars. There was this one car that I saw them having, and it was to avoid accidents, and it was made in the front of the car. There was a large circle. It had this large circle so that when you bumped into things, this type of really like circular fender would bump you off to the side. And it never went into production. It was a mainly concept only, because they just couldn't figure out how to put it into to make it a business, a smart decision. And one of the interesting things is that, when you have a lot of this early innovation, people are, innovating. They're making things. And, and there's creativity to it, and sometimes the sacrilege that happens with that, where someone's like experiments and tried something new. But then you get these great, amazing things that come up from that, and let's be real, this industry came from people who were, doing this craft in these traditional places, and it was storied and long, but yet they also had ways of doing things that were sometimes new, or sometimes there was an accident that made something amazing. It was, hey, wow, that worked out well. But and I think that what we're talking about is one of the reasons that many people feel disconnected from wine today. I mean, I know that I grew up in the Napa Valley, and anytime that I go back up there now, I feel disconnected. It is not the same place that I grew up, and I try to, people are leaving, families are leaving, because it is now, and this is not just to speak on the socioeconomics of the Napa Valley, but I do think it talks about the wine industry. When you have this thing that, like, what made wine country special was the humanity to it. It wasn't just the wineries. It was like the little mom and pop restaurants, these little tiny shops. And now, if you want to have that experience, man, you have to drive up to up to Middletown area, to the valleys above the valley, because it's changed so much, But I feel like the wine, it's a symbol of the wine industry of itself. It used to be that you'd come up to Napa, go wine tasting, get some massage, have a Junie sandwich in St. Helena, and experience kind of like that thing. But now, let's go up for the $2,000 tasting. And the only people that can afford that are like the .com bros. And it's just this hyper segmentation that is not, and I talked about this before too. Like, if you did this for the automobile industry, we're just going to stop producing the Honda Civics of the world. We're going to stop producing the lower end, like day-to-day vehicles. And we are only going to have Bugattis and Lamborghinis being sold. That's it. It would lead to a situation that automobile industry would not be sustainable in the long term, because you are cutting out huge segments of the population.
No, I think you're saying the same thing that I began the topic of business with, coming from the other direction, which is great. Coming from the consumer's point of view. The consumer's point of view is that this is that it used to be attainable, that it used to be something that you went out of your way to enjoy because of it, because of the authenticity, because of the integrity of the situation, of driving up to Napa and sitting at a counter and talking to Joe Heights himself, or talking to Robert Mondavi, because you could. And it, it's one of those wonderful stories that I have from 30 years ago, where I sat next to Robert Mondavi in a restaurant. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Those types of experiences are oftentimes now manufactured for you in a lab or on a website, or in, these experiences are crafted for you at tremendous expense. And so, you do it really helps to be a .com bro if you want to come up here and drink $300 bottles of Cabernet. And like I said about the problem with the wine business is that business took over the motivations of the producers. And the motivation of the producer in 1968 wasn't to sell his company or flip the company 3 years later and retire. The motivation was to build something that lasted 200 years. Like they did in Europe, and like they still do, well, to a certain extent in Europe. But, no one was trying to flip their company, and nobody was trying to, or believe it or not, no one was even trying to go public with it. It wasn't that big a business. It was small business. And you gotta go back, all the way back, and remember that one of the issues with European wines is that, or one of the great things about European wine is that everything was local. If you lived in Burgundy, you drank Burgundy. If you lived in Bordeaux, you drank Bordeaux. Here in California, we're lucky we've got all the wine, and a lot of wine in California, and we can drink local all we want. But this is a big country. So we had to figure out over the last couple of decades how to move it around. And that's, that became a thing. I mean, we don't give ourselves enough credit as a wine business for figuring out a lot of the intricacies of e-commerce and fulfillment and shipping and things like that. Getting a bottle of California wine to New York used to be an extraordinary thing. It's not anymore. Getting it to your front door used to be an extraordinary and impossible thing. It's not anymore. It's fine. We figured that out. Beginning around 2005, we figured all that out. In Europe, they still don't do it, because everyone is content to drink what's near them. And that's great. And I just don't know that we have that kind of option. So Napa turns into a cartoon of itself, which is, but I live here. I love Napa. And it's, these are still small businesses to some extent, but they really are being pressed upon by much larger concerns, with different kinds of efficiencies that they're reaching for, different kinds of motivations that they have, as opposed to building 200-year-long businesses. It's a different thing.
One of the things too, that when you're focusing entirely on flipping the company at some point in time, it's a race to the bottom. Sure. It's a race of margins, and at that point in time, it's not like, and granted, I've had some people onto this podcast who are absolutely amazing, and they're going the opposite direction. People who said, you know what, we were looking at going that way, and we just realized that wasn't for us. We wanted to go this way and take it back to the place where we're going smaller, where we're making less, where we're really looking at how can we make the best product possible. Because, at the end of the day, we have this massive world where everything is interconnected now. but we have this product that sets it is so important for time and place, and the sense that the origin, the vineyard, and the season still matter to wine. This 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 idea that something can be so special in its own uniqueness. I grew up I lived above the valley in this little town called Angwin, and up in the Howell Mountain region. And it was gritty up there. My friends were out, we were out in the mountains, mountain biking. And, and it's interesting that now I find that like that special locale has very special wines, and they reflect kind of the energy of what it was like to grow up there. And that place is something few products have.
Actually, you're absolutely right about Angwin. It's one of the first things that I fell in love with when I fell in love with Napa wines as part of the bigger wine picture I was painting for myself. You're right, that mountain has a certain energy to it. That mountain is red, and it creates a wine that is unique and different than a lot of the wines that surround it. And it stands by itself. It makes powerful things that have a particular character. And much like the people that live on that mountain, they're far away. Even though they're in the same zip code, it takes an hour to get there. There's a uniqueness to it. And my gosh, I mean, you just pulled one story about one town in Napa that is just one of a million stories that can be told about Napa. Now multiply that across the entire world of wine, and and you see why
100%.
people find it so interesting, because it is interesting, because it's not something that you want to say, oh no, it's too complex for me. I'm not invited to this party because I don't have the time to learn all these stories, and I don't have the time to figure all this stuff out. Well, you don't have to. You don't have to. You don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to figure out chord progression to listen to music. You just don't. I don't know how to do that. Radiohead is complex. It's difficult sometimes, but it's always it's a pursuit worth approaching. It's just like wine. You go to the store and pick out something that scares you a little because you don't know what it is. Hopefully, you don't get something like sweet or whatever, something weird. But talk to a human being about it if you can. There's no one to talk to in a lot of places anymore. That's one of the things that we're really missing, is that the conversation about wine, honestly, too, is gone. We've lost the human that holds a bottle in his hand, cradling it like it's precious, even though it's $10, and points it at you and says, "This wine's really good. You should try this.
Yeah.
I think you'll like this."
Yeah.
And those experiences, which were very common 15, 20 years ago, because that's how you bought wine, are very much gone in a lot of places. It still exists in great shops in Washington and New York, and great shops in LA, which you can name. But generally speaking, that's not where wine is being purchased right now. 99% of wine, or I don't know if that's a real number, 90% of wine is being produced for a massive market. It's built for efficiency.
Yeah.
But, we need people.
I remember when I was a kid, we had this one video store in St. Helena, and everyone would go there to rent their movies, Peter's. And you'd walk into Peter's, and Peter would be sitting there, and he'd start telling you about the movies that you were picking out because, he was an expert on the films. He watched everything. He tried everything. He experienced everything. And it was great because wine has had, for many people, feels intimidated or overcomplicated. And, the idea of having this guide there that can kind of simplify it for you and help you fall in love with it without, making it too complex. Because at the end of the day, man, it's a tasty beverage. And there's different types, and they do different things, and they have, what's your palate like? What are the things that you enjoy? I remember one time I was getting a recommendation for a movie, and I watched movies that were always in a type of box. My movies have kind of existed in this framework. And when I told this film expert where my box was, he was able to go, all right, you like here. I'm not going to push you too hard. Let's try here. And I went there and I was just like, that's amazing. And it was one of the interesting things too, is like, you think about that. We tend to self-identify in ways that is still limiting. Like, oh, I'm not a jazz guy.
Mhm.
And then suddenly you listen to a piece of music because you stepped outside that comfort zone and you're like, oh, I like that. And like suddenly, well, hang on. I am a jazz guy or I am a rock guy. I like rap. I like this and that. I like country, whatever it might be. And what is that space that you're willing to step into because you took a chance? You took a chance and there was someone there to help you not feel intimidated by that.
This is what a funny thing you bring up, because it happened last night, literally last night. My 12-year-old daughter comes down the steps with her phone in her hand, and she says, I just discovered a song and I love it and I don't know why. And we said, well, what is it? And she goes, I don't know what it's called. And she started playing it. It was Miles Davis. I'm not making that up. From one of the tracks off of Kinda Blue. And we both looked at each other and said, oh, what have we done? We've created something amazing here. But you know what? Nobody needed to give her, my daughter, permission to go look for it, to see it, to experience it. She just went and did it. And that's one of the, when people are worried about having permission to study wine or having permission to enjoy wine, that's self-imposed. You don't need permission from me to tell you what's good, what you should try. Just go in fearlessly and find yourself, because wine allows you to do that. Just like, other products are like that, just like music is like that, like movies are like that. If you like Quentin Tarantino, you probably like Akira Kurosawa too. Easily. I mean, those are easy comparisons to make, but, wine insists that we slow down and pay attention to ourselves a little bit more. Honestly, it makes us think.
I was watching. I'm a huge fan. I love Star Wars, but some of them recently were not that great. But then The Mandalorian came out, and I was like, "Oh yes, this is amazing." And I loved it, not just because it was Star Wars, but because I was watching those early episodes, and I was like, "Man, this is the samurai movie like series Lone Wolf and Cub. Like this is like Baby Cart to the River Hades was the second episode of The Mandalorian." I was like, this is 100% from that series. And it took experience and it took trying things and it took and that's one of the things too, because when you've had the ability to taste different wines, you get to the point where you're like, okay, this was inspired by this. I can see these similarities. I can see these connections. And one of the beautiful parts is like, again, I'm coming back to wine wasn't made to be experienced alone. It's not just a beverage. It is an absolute social ritual, And I think in a time that we are so divided, I opened the internet and I like 1, 2, and I'm like, that's enough for today. I just had to stop because, there is just so much division, friends fighting this friend, people that were rational a couple years ago have now become irrational. What role do you see wine playing in bringing people together that other drinks don't?
There's a lot of conversation in the trade, if you will, about that subject, to try to remind people that wine is one of those things that brings us together, that connects us. But you have to think about it that way. For example, I mean, you go down into my wine refrigerator box with a few hundred bottles of wine in it, and I'll pull one out and I go, I'm actually holding that for this person. And I put it back. I would much rather have it with this person. And I have already assigned purposes to the wines, even without thinking. As soon as I pull it out, I go, I'm going to wait for my friend James to come over, and we'll try that. We'll try that together, because I know he'll like it, or I'll know he'll want it. I will want to share that with him. And it doesn't matter what his politics are, or my politics are, or what my beliefs are, or his. The wine is at least an opportunity to meet on something. meaningful. Two people who don't know each other are standing in front of a painting in MoMA, and they are all of a sudden communicating with each other on the same level about the same thing, and it's not forced. It doesn't have. It's not forced.
No.
Now, creating that situation, doesn't mean you have to build a museum to do it. But wine is portable. Wine, you can bring the compatibility, you can bring the conversation anywhere you want, just by putting it in your bag and taking it where it needs to go, to that occasion, to find your people. And again, especially you look at social media, look at Facebook and whatnot, and I'm in all these groups where we diligently take pictures of all the bottles we consume that are interesting, and post them like we're bragging to the other people. But we're really not bragging. We're not bragging, and everyone knows that. We're telling you that we've done something interesting, and we want to share it with you the only way we can, because you're not here. So we tell you about it, and that's part of the appreciation. And I think that's part of that. That's what's. I think that's community building too. It's not just to what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a connection, and like that's one of the things that I think that I wish I could get my friends to that are not wine lovers to understand, that like wine isn't just about the alcohol.
Oh, no.
Like certainly it has, it has it, but I would reframe it to help them try to understand that it's more than that. It's a story in a glass. It's a time together that we can share. Like what you were talking about, where you guys are posting these photos, even though you're not together experiencing that, you're still sharing it. You're still communicating and connecting. How often do people sit there and go, you know what? I need to tell you about this experience I had doing X, Y, and Z. It's not that often. Maybe travel has some of that, has some of those overtones. But I mean, travel's not something that, unless you jump onto one of those giant, like mega tourist groups, which is not the most fun way to travel. But I mean, certainly maybe if you were to get an RV and you're traveling cross country with a group of people, all right, that's going to be stressful, but fun at the same time. But that's one of the closest things that you could do to having an experience in a bottle with someone, because it's this community,
No, I have never been to Pompeii, but I would be really interested to know what your visit was like, for example.
Yes.
I've not been to Vietnam. I was in Singapore recently, which was quite interesting and lovely in ways. I've not been to Vietnam, but I would love to hear your opinion of it and what the experience is like. Wine is even more than a travelogue. Like I said from the beginning, it's a travelogue through time and space and people and things. And there is no product on earth. This is what it comes down to. There is no product on earth with the complexity, and I don't mean in taste, but the complexity in its production, in its conception, in the growth, the maintenance, the elevation of it, the delivery of it, the business of it. There's nothing like. That's why it's a discipline that very few people can actually manage. That's why very few people are really in the wine business per se, and why people find boring people like me interesting, because I do something very few people do, and that is trade in wine. Extraordinarily complex in terms of chemistry and agriculture, botany, and soil lithology. And then we haven't even begun with the merchant process. I mean, it's just remarkable, the complexity of compliance and laws and the regulations and all of it. I mean, it's a stunning amount of work that goes into a bottle of wine, and interestingly, over huge arcs of time. It doesn't take, you don't just pop out a burrito and it goes in a bag. What do you call it? No, I'm sorry, not a burrito, a Dorito, and it goes in a bag and it goes to the Safeway. And if people buy a lot of them, you make more of them. Wine isn't like that. It's finite. It takes many. It turns slowly. It takes 3 years to make a bottle of Cabernet. 3 years from the grape to the barrel to the bottle to the consumer, and then if you drink it at the proper time, it's longer than 3 years. And that's how does any business on the planet run like that? None do. None should. It's difficult business that way, but it's worth studying.
You think about that, right? And you think about the Dorito example you had, like You think about that. If they run out, they're going to find the ingredients to source the ingredients to make more Doritos. It's not an infinite amount of Doritos that can be created, but I guarantee you they will up production to match demand. Versus I have one of the things that I love, and I love it in the summertime in California, but here in Vietnam, we have year-round like fresh markets. And I will go there, and we just finished up pomegranate season. And like, my goodness, there was fresh pomegranates everywhere. And now you can't, the pomegranates are done for the year. And if you want a pomegranate, you just are going to have to wait because they're not shipping them in from everywhere. It's kind of what's local and what's been grown. And it's interesting because my mother-in-law, she buys a bunch, and she stashed a bunch of them in her fridge. And so she's got these pomegranates that are just on ice in the back, chilling, waiting for a time to pop out. And the beauty of that is that there's this time and place. But one of the things that you see with wine and such, there's trends that come and go. And we have aspects of wine culture that are great, and some that are timeless, and some that are things that change over time. And I don't think that cinema helps us very much on this too, because they try to kind of anytime they show someone who's into wine, it's kind of more the wine snob and less the wine culture. But what are some aspects of wine culture that you think are truly timeless?
Ooh, you're right. I want to visit that. The example I use is cacio e pepe, because I noticed for a while that flavor showed up at Trader Joe's in every form, and then until it didn't. And you can switch on and switch off these trends if you like, if you're a different kind of product. But if you're a wine product, you try to chase a trend and you will not make it. You will lose that race. You cannot all of a sudden, if I don't know, make something up. If Viognier becomes really, really popular, and you change all your plantings over to Viognier, you're really not going to be ready for it for another 3 to 6 years. And at that point, who knows if anyone even cares or can pronounce Viognier anymore? It just it's just too difficult to do. So, what makes it persistent is everything. It's its slowness makes it persistent. Its slowness to change. Its consistency within the history of the earth. You've got 6,000 or 8,000 years where wine has brought these people together. It's been a purposeful product. It's been a local product. It's sometimes hyper local, and it's a thoughtful approach to alcohol, and which is something that we have required as human beings for a long time. That we need some sort of stimulant like that, or depressant, however you want to classify it. We've always wanted that. We've always been drawn to it, and we've managed to make it healthful somewhat and sophisticated too, memorable too. We've perfected it. Honestly, when you think about it, we've perfected the notion of drinking together. And that's what makes it persistent and keeps it around, just like pub culture, purposefully brought people together so that they could drink together and then go home whenever they wanted to go home. It became ritual, and ritual can be timeless. And I hope we don't lose that. I hope we don't lose the ritual. I know people make fun of the rituals that surround wine, the swirling glasses, the popping corks, and the sniffs and all that stuff that people make fun of, especially in movies. They make fun of it, but it's the ritual that makes it timeless. It's what makes it last forever. I'm grateful for it.
I love that. And we live in an age of convenience and speed, and it's not helping us. Last night, I was talking to my daughter. My daughter is a sweet, smart, young, compassionate little kid, 9 years old, turning 10 soon. And yet she has this really bad habit now. And we are pretty strict with tablets and devices, but she's gotten hooked on the one up in grandpa and grandma's space, and she'll sneak over to grandpa grandma's to kind of jump on that tablet. And it makes it so that she's less focused and she gets distracted. It's the little dopamine rushes. And I'm not diving into that, but what I am diving into is that what I found and we've introduced to her is I'm like, we're going to talk about something really special. And she's like, what's that? She's like, and I'm like, books. We're going to practice reading. We're going to read more. Well, because it's like the YouTube shorts. And I know that I will cut this video and have short form content going up. But you know what? Not a huge fan of that type of the way they feed it to you. And like you start here and then suddenly you're just like, your brain has gotten sucked into something. You're like, where did I just spend the last 30 minutes? But one of the things that I love about wine is that it asks us to slow down, just like a good book does for my daughter, just like a fine piece of music. I love my vinyl as well. I love throwing a record on. And one of the things with vinyl is you are sitting through, and I remember this was something that I believe Taylor Swift was always upset about. And I think the concessions were made by Spotify to change this, that the album order was really important. They would just put things up in whatever order on the digital streaming, and artists were like, no, I want you to sit down. And this is one of the things I love when I get on vinyl is that you sit down and there is this story arc that happens in the music. You start at the beginning song and there's a reason they wanted that song there. And there's a reason the second song is the second song and onward like that, because it's about slowing down and having this experience as you listen to the full thing.
Oh, imagine listening to Wish You Were Here out of order. It would make no sense. It would make no sense. That's a crime. That's a crime. I remember when my son was very little, I showed him a picture in a book and he used his fingers to try to make it bigger, but it was in a book. I think that's cliche at this point. I think it happened, but I think it's happened to lots of people. This is their experience. I also wondered when, because my kids, like all kids today, stare into screens very often, and you worry about socialization and the importance of socialization, but then you realize they have friends on that screen and they're talking to each other. Yeah, it's through, I don't know, Minecraft or whatever it's through, but they are socializing in a way. And so you should have hope that this is going to work out.
Yeah.
And the same is true with wine. You should have hope that this is going to work itself out. And it's because of the vinyl records. Because a lot of people are, and I'm talking about teenagers, are approaching vinyl. They don't know why, but they're approaching vinyl because they are really, really starving for authenticity. For authenticity, they know they've probably missed out on. They're going to try and get it back. Mm-hmm. And I think you can draw a lot of parables you want to wine. And I think that is one of these days that after the complex diversity of wines available to you have been winnowed all the way down to whatever's at Safeway, and there's nothing left to choose from, that the reaction will be a convulsion of no, this is wrong. We need to go back and find that small producer of Côte d'Aron, that small Chianti producer, and make them available again. It doesn't have to be everywhere. They don't have to scale to sell in 50 states. They just have to be sold here, where I want them. And I think the best days for wine after all these changes that are coming, and that's really what my book was about, after all these changes are made, and the contractions happen and the convulsions happen, that its best days are in front of it. Because I think people really do want it. I think they want it back. They want what they think they missed back in 1985 or whatever, 1975. When wine was new and fabulous and interesting and authentic. They want it back.
I think that that's an entire cultural revelation at this time, is that people are seeking back authenticity. And I think that, and I also like just the general message of have that hope. Have that hope that the kids that are like headfirst into these devices are going to figure it out. Have hope that, that we are on the right track, because at the end of the day, I think that society, life, the world self-corrects. And I think that we might be in a weird place right now, socially, politically, whatever, but have faith that things will shift. And in the meantime, find the space to sit in that present and be where you're at, be where we're all at in that moment. It's like, I'm going to open up a bottle with my family tonight to celebrate. My wife was traveling over the holidays for work. And we're all going to sit down and we're going to have a bottle together. And in that moment, our worries are not gone. Our stresses are still there, but we can sit together and find a little bit of peace in that community for a period of time.
And slow down and talk to each other.
Exactly. Where can people find out more about what you do, your work, and find out more about you?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. This is, I have it next to me. This is the name of the, I don't know if you can see that. The name of the book that I wrote is called The Post-Pandemic Wine Market. It's for people in the trade, just so you know. Don't go buying it if you're not in the trade and you're thinking it's about appreciation. It's about appreciation of the wine business. But thank you for buying it anyway. If you want to hear more of my deep thoughts, you just have to look for me on Substack. And that's where I am. Otherwise, come look for me in Napa, and I'll surely have a bottle of wine open for you when you get here. I always do.